I work part-time at a shelter for homeless and runaway youth, ages 10 to 17. And I work there as a result of doing an internship when I was completing my undergrad. And I think my view towards homelessness really started to shift. One day I was driving to work, and there was a guy with his bike, and he was sitting on the corner, and he was just sitting there, and I was like, well, you know, he looks pretty able-bodied. Why isn't he out working? And so I had that sort of fleeting thought, and I went to work, and there was a 17-year-old boy there, and he was staying in the shelter because his parents were homeless, and he got really sick, and he came down with an illness, and he had to be quarantined from the rest of the shelter, but he couldn't leave the shelter because he didn't have anywhere to go, and his parents didn't have health care, so we couldn't really take him to the doctor or anything. And I had found out from my supervisor that his dad was going to be bringing him medicine, but he wouldn't be there for about a couple hours, and I was like, well, why is it going to take so long? And they weren't really sure. And when his dad showed up, it was the guy that I had seen sitting on the side of the road with money, or asking for money with his bike. And I kind of put two and two together, and I was like, this guy was panhandling for change, but he was doing it so that he could buy the medicine from the CVS to then ride his bike all the way the 25 blocks to the shelter to bring it to his son because they couldn't afford to take him to the doctor. And so that whole situation was very eye-opening for me, and it just really made me understand that we can see somebody and look at them and think we know what their situation is like, and we can make all of these judgments about what they should or they should not be doing, but we really have no clue about what their circumstances truly are.
It's a song called American Love Story. It's an American love story, full of guts and glory. We like manifest destiny, consuming what we want from California to Vermont. We just take everything we need. The rich keep getting richer, and the poor keep getting lost. Sometimes I think that we've been double-crossed. Well, my mortgage got so high, now I'm sleeping beneath the sky. Ain't got a job, a paycheck, or a boss. It's an American love story, full of guts and glory. We like manifest destiny. We're consuming all we want from California to Vermont. We just take everything we need. We sold our soul to China, and now the payment's due. Yep, they own the red, the white, and blue. We ain't paid back the debt, how we haven't even paid the interest yet. Obama don't know what he's gonna do. We're fighting for our country, but something's kind of funky. I don't remember being attacked by the countries that we're in. Must be some kind of awful sin to be killing folks in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's an American love story, full of guts and glory. We like manifest destiny. We're consuming all we want from California to Vermont. We're Americans, we take everything we need. So come and join our military. Gee, I hope you ain't a fairy. Women to the left, men to the right. We'll give you bullets and a gun, man, we're gonna have some fun. Shooting up Mohammed's house tonight. It's an American love story, it's full of guts and glory. We love manifest destiny. We're consuming all we want from California to Vermont. We're Americans, we take everything we need to fulfill our lust and greed. Hi, my name is Dave Shepard. I live here in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a local musician. I own a music school called the Rock and Blues Academy. And I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about the homeless people in St. Pete, the poor people in St. Pete, and what's been going on in their lives. We have a city that's not very caring about the homeless and the poor, and a mayor and a city council and a police department that seems bent on removing them from the streets of St. Petersburg. mainly because they don't look good and they're afraid they won't attract business. I think they're definitely putting financial interests ahead of human rights. If you're a homeless person in St. Pete, chances are you've been arrested 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 times. And not for committing any crimes, but for breaking city ordinances. Ordinances that are only passed during the last 8 years. And ordinances which are aimed exactly at the homeless people themselves. For instance, if you have an open container of beer, well, homeless people, just like most of us, will drink a beer sometimes. But they can only do it outdoors, they have no choice. Also, at night, St. Petersburg locks all the restrooms. So the homeless people have nowhere to go to the bathroom. Well, just like the rest of us, they have to go to the bathroom. I'd like to sing you a little song right now. I'm sure you all can relate to it. Deep, deep down in your souls. This goes out to all the homeless people. Everybody's got to pee. Homeless folk, they're just like you and me. We all got the same old working parts. So come on everybody, let's have a heart. The man with the key, he locks the bathroom door. He says until the sun comes up, y'all can't go here no more. And if we catch you in a bush or with a pail, another man with the keys gonna lock your ass in jail. You know it's true, come on now. 'Cause everybody's got to pee. Homeless folk, they're just like you and me. We all got the same old working parts. You know what I'm talking about. Come on everybody, let's have a heart. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was about to burst. I said if I let it rip right now, that won't be right. In fact, that would be the worst. And I was dreaming I was living on the streets. I ran for the nearest bush I could find. The blue lights were flashing as I was splashing around my feet. I said, officer, I'm just trying to be discreet. Don't you know that? Well, everybody's got to pee. Homeless folk, they're just like you and me. That's right. We all got the same old working parts. Talking about that plumbing down there. Come on, Mayor, let's have a heart. Well, even Jesus had to pee. He traveled with a lot of company. I'm sure there were times when his bladder felt that push. And Jesus Christ, he had to find the nearest bush. You know it's true, come on now. 'Cause everybody's got to pee. Homeless folk, they're just like you and me. We all got the same old working parts. So come on, officer, just have a heart. 'Cause everybody's got to pee. Homeless folk, they're just like you and me. We all got the same old working parts. That's right. So come on, everybody, have a heart. Oh, let them pee. Let them pee. Let them pee. Oh, let them pee. Unlock public restrooms so they can pee. Thank you. Tammy and Steve. And Tammy, how long have you been living outside?
I've been 14 months now.
14 months. And what happened that resulted in you being homeless?
I had left a job under the understanding that I'd be able to get another one, that I was a trained machine operator. And of course the economy, I didn't know it was as bad as it was, and was not able to get another job. And so as a result, I've lost my place and, reservations which I didn't have. Financially, I just wound up homeless and unable to recover from it.
So it's basically from a job loss. And it's a beautiful day today, and he's out here enjoying the fresh air. But I know that lately it's been pretty cold at night. And have you been living outdoors, sleeping outdoors most nights? And how are you dealing with the cold weather?
Right now I'm sleeping at St. Vincent de Paul's at night. And you can stay in there for 21 nights, and then you have to go out for 14. So I've been in there for about a week, so I have like 2 weeks left. Hopefully the weather will warm up by the end of that time.
So you get about 3 weeks indoors. And what are the sleeping conditions like in there?
You get a mat. It's in the dining room. You get a mat and a blanket, and you go in at 9, and you have to be out by 5 in the morning.
And then you have a couple weeks you can't be there. Do you sleep outdoors a lot of nights then?
Pretty much, yes. There's no other place to go. I don't. Hopefully, I start drawing Social Security soon. I'll be 62, and with that, I can maybe find a small room to rent somewhere where I can stay inside. But right now, it's just those 14 days. I just have to fend for myself.
And how do you deal with the cold weather when it gets down in the 30s and 40s?
I bundle up. I get cold, basically. Yeah. Blankets that I can. It's not once you get under the blankets to get warm. It's not too bad.
Most of the time I've had to sleep outside because the schedules that they keep for most of the shelters have been almost impossible with trying to go to school and get back on my feet, They're like, some of them, they kick you out at 5 in the morning. You can't go in before 9. Their shower schedules are most of the time between 2 to 5 or 2 to 6. And, it's almost impossible to keep that kind of a schedule if you're trying to look for work or get school or those kind of things. And the assistance for transportation is very limited to specific persons. From my experience anyways, it has been.
So have you been looking for a job?
Yes, I have.
And what kind of prospects do you see out there right now?
I haven't had very many.
What's it like being homeless as a woman? What are some of the issues you have to face, maybe different than what a guy would have to deal with?
The worst thing for a female is the place to use the restroom at night. There's almost nowhere. The safety issue is almost, you're not safe. And with the new ordinances, the law enforcement, everywhere we seem to try to sleep, it's almost impossible. You're going to get a ticket.
And have you ever been ticketed before?
Yes, I have. I got one for trespassing.
And was that for being in a park after dark, or?
I was sleeping in a parking lot. It was posted, but you know how it is when you get that tired. You just got to. I fell down basically.
Are there very many public restrooms in St. Pete, and are they open during the day or nighttime?
Most of them are open during the day, but there's not very many of them. And of course, like I say, after 7, 8 o'clock at night, it becomes very difficult to find a place.
And what are your hopes for the future?
Well, I hope that the city will be more apt to try to help those that want jobs to get them. Make access to employment easier for us. Help us locate the employment. Some of us need help even knowing who's hiring and where and how to get there. We need a lot of help, I think, for that.
Well, I'm actually retired from the state of Maryland. I took an early retirement.
And what kind of job did you do there in the state of Maryland?
I worked for the Forest and Park Service as a park technician. Pretty much everything,
And how did you end up living outdoors?
Well, I my first wife died, and I remarried, and my second wife wanted to go back to where her family was in North Carolina. And then when we split up, I just didn't feel like going back to Maryland, so I came down here where I figured it'd be warm and hopefully find some work. And this is where I ended up. I did have a job for a while, but I got laid off, and now I'm still hopefully trying to find something else till my Social Security kicks in anyway. And but it's hard when you're homeless without an address, and it's hard to find a job. People don't want to hire homeless people.
I'm a social worker, and so I have an obvious bias towards helping marginalized and oppressed populations like the homeless. And I had a discussion the other day with a woman in a coffee shop who said, I think that they should try and pull themselves up. And I know that, they don't have a place to sleep, but I don't understand why I should have to look at that every day. She said, I don't want to see that. I don't want to have to be faced with that.
Okay, I'm the Reverend Bruce Wright with Refuge Ministries and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and we're an organization committed to justice for the poor and the homeless. I'm on the National Committee of the Poor People's Campaign, and of course Refuge Ministries is also committed to that notion of justice for the poor and the homeless. One of the things unique about the Poor People's Campaign is that we work from the bottom up. We work alongside and under the leadership of those who've experienced homelessness and poverty. I have been there myself over the last few years, have struggled with what's commonly called couch homelessness. And we have had a very serious concern, increasing concern in fact, about what's going on with homelessness and poverty in America as it relates to criminalization. We are increasingly seeing cities around the country, including St. Petersburg, Florida, who was named the second meanest city in the country by the National Coalition for the Homeless, continuing to criminalize poor and homeless people. In fact, the state in which I'm residing, Florida, is now the #1 state in the country for both hate crimes against the homeless and criminalization of the homeless simply because they have no place to lay their head. So the solutions that are consistently being come up with are brought up by municipalities and law enforcement and the powers that be, including, unfortunately, social service agencies in collusion with these powers that be, is let's criminalize the homeless to get them out of sight so we can't see them. And in fact, label the homeless as kind of a separate entity. It's us and them. The reality is most Americans are 2 paychecks away from homelessness. The fastest growing number of homeless are families with children, especially single parent families, and veterans as well. And along with those two groups of categories where we're seeing an increase in homelessness is this whole situation that's happening with looking at solutions to solve the problem of homelessness by criminalizing them and giving them not alternatives that are developed by the homeless community, but alternatives that are developed by cities and law enforcement that include such things as using former jails, as in this county, in Pinellas County, to house the homeless, and in effect create a criminalization effort just by where they put them. With this jail annex, for instance, that's right next to the Pinellas County Jail. What they have done in St. Petersburg is law enforcement has been going around over the last several months and telling the homeless community that they have a choice of a one-way bus ticket out of town or going voluntarily to this quote-unquote voluntary jail or going to regular jail, and again criminalizing them. So it's become a very serious problem here. It's a problem that's emerging throughout the country, and it's this whole idea of judging and criminalizing people simply based on their class and their status. And so we are part of a major struggle that is emerging throughout the country to fight this. And we believe that housing is a human right, that health care is a human right, that a living wage job is a human right, that freedom of assembly and freedom of movement is a human right. And fundamentally what has to happen is that we who are out there that see this problem need to rise up and demand that our government follow the UN Declaration of Human Rights.
I'm Steve Norris. I'm an Air Force brat, so I'm from everywhere, but currently I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was employed at a major university here, which I won't mention the name of. I was employed there for 12 years. I lost my job there. Basically, the bean counters came in. The state cracked down on state funding, and it's always middle management that goes first. And that was basically the deal with me and several other middle managers. Subsequently after that, after losing my job, my wife and I got divorced from the stress of losing the job. And she had to go take care of her father, who doesn't have insurance. Her parents both worked their whole lives. Her mother worked 30 years at a coal mining company and was forced to retire early. I think it was she got half of her benefits and no medical coverage, and James was privately employed and never had medical coverage. So he has Alzheimer's, and she's left to go take care of them. The stress from that and me losing the job, we got divorced. Shortly after that, my home went in foreclosure. And within about an 8 months time period, I went from making 6 figures a year to sleeping on the sidewalks of downtown St. Petersburg. You think it can't happen to you, and it can, trust me, and it can happen fast. That's kind of my story as far as how I ended up on the sidewalks. I slept about 2 months off and on here in shelters, on the sidewalks from downtown St. Pete, in shelters and that sort of thing.
In reality, it is not just a class problem, but it's a race problem as well, certainly. We see the gentrification happening of downtown areas where low-income people of color live, becoming playgrounds for the rich and powerful. That's really evident in Florida for obvious reasons, because we're a tourist state. And also just the whole idea of racial profiling by law enforcement. So yeah, it is both a race and class issue. It's informed by race as well as class, but it's gone beyond race now. We have people that are being criminalized simply because of their economic status.
There's one particular law enforcement officer, and I don't know his name to be honest, but he gets a real thrill out of intimidating local homeless people. And it seemed to bring him great joy that there was a law. I think there's a law here. I think it's you're not allowed to sleep or be in the prone position after 7 in the morning, I think it is. I don't know how they're going to enforce that in the parks, like if people are having a picnic or something. So what he really enjoyed doing was he enjoyed rolling his patrol car up on people who were sleeping on the sidewalk and just roll it right up to them and then hit that really loud bullhorn sound, siren thing that they have in the car. It's like a special kind of alarm thing they have just to wake homeless people. I don't know of any other purpose it has, but they hit that and startle people up off the sidewalks. And I think he gets a real kick out of that. And me personally, I think it's really fascist and it's despicable to watch it happen. But he seemed to take, great amusement in that. I and my girlfriend were actually sleeping in a park, which was very close to St. Vincent's. We weren't sleeping in St. Vincent's, by the way, because St. Vincent's didn't have enough beds. We were turned away. The interesting thing about that, if I might add, is that there are 40 spaces. Now, when they say 40 spaces, what that means there are 40 mats that they lay on the floor that you sleep on the floor. Now, they have probably 80 to 100 mats and the space for the 80 and 100 mats. But since the city will only give them money for 40 spaces, although I don't know why it would cost any more for you to sleep here or there or whatever, the city will only fund them for 40 people. I don't know what that means, the funding. They have the mats, but that's all they'll allow to sleep there. And so we were turned away from the door. So we went a quarter of a mile down the street to a park. We were in the park maybe an hour, something like that, and St. Pete police actually drove the patrol car into the park and into the park and pulled right up beside us and turned the spotlight on us and told us that, you know, the park closes at dawn and that we had to leave the park. And he ensured that that was going to happen by remaining in his vehicle, the spotlight on us, until we left the park. And he actually drove behind us the entire time as we were leaving the park to make sure that we weren't staying there. And warned us with, threatened us, I guess, with a $113 ticket if he caught us there again. And we saw several people arrested around there, or given tickets, but people were arrested for laying down past 7 o'clock in the morning. One person was actually laying back against a sleeping bag, and were not even asleep, but laying back, and they were given a $113 ticket for loitering. So yeah, we've had those encounters. You know, I personally am accepted by the public because I guess I don't look homeless. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but what's funny is the people in the homeless environment were less accepting of me because I guess I didn't look homeless. And people actually, like in the shelters and stuff like that, people would actually come up to me and ask me questions because I guess they thought I was employed there. So I think that maybe people like me in America are starting to change the face of homelessness, because I think when every 13 or 19 seconds another house is foreclosed on in America, something like that. So there's a lot more people becoming homeless very quickly. But I find the general populace around, you know, doesn't really treat me any differently or any worse. But if you're down in a homeless environment, you know, like at a shelter, the people that are around there do definitely, you know, treat you differently. You are looked at differently. The only time I really felt it affect me was there's a mobile health van that rides around, and it's a really great service actually. And they give medical attention to the homeless people and medication, that sort of thing. And I went there because I have a thyroid condition. I needed thyroid medication, so I went in the mobile van. And they were starting this project down at St. Vincent's where they're tearing up the sidewalks, literally tearing up sidewalks. And they're planting palm trees or something like that. And what they're really doing, they're calling it beautification, but what they're really doing is they're displacing homeless people who were sleeping there by tearing up the environment they were sleeping in. People slept on the sidewalk beside the shelter because they felt safe there. It's a place where you could eat and there's safety in numbers. So the city tore up this whole area to displace homeless people, and my greatest thought about that was when they put the palm trees up. I'm like, look at the city, what great people they're giving us shade to sleep in. You know, but I got on this mobile medical van, and one of the ladies said to another nurse that was working there, she said, "Have you seen what they're doing down at St. Vincent's?" And the other lady said, "Yeah, with the palm trees." She said, "Yeah, isn't that beautiful?" And I said, "Do you know why they're doing that?" She said, "Yeah, it's to keep all those bums from sleeping down there." And it really hit me. And I just looked at her, and I guess she caught herself in that moment. And the other nurse looked at me and said, "Are you sleeping down there?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm one of the bums that was sleeping down there." The nurse that was working with me didn't apologize. She just acted like I didn't belong down there. I guess was her point of view at that point in time. She's like, "You didn't really sleep down there." And I went, "Didn't sleep? I'm currently sleeping down there." So yeah, that's, I guess, the only time that I've had that direct, you know, kind of contact with someone where I could really see how some people feel about that, what their attitudes are.
There's a lot of intimidation that happens at the hands of law enforcement. If you are homeless and on the street, you can expect to be ID'd regularly for no good reason, harassed, threatened, and I think brutalized emotionally. And I know that it's happened, brutalization of the homeless, and assumptions made. We have a woman that we've worked with for some time, and I can't give her name obviously, but just recently, just because she was walking down a certain neighborhood and she looked like she might have been homeless, or because of her race, she was black, The police started to question her and ID, asked for her ID, and she refused, and she says, I haven't done anything. At that point, the cops slammed her to the ground and handcuffed her, and while handcuffed, maced her. This stuff happens all the time, and this is in St. Petersburg we're talking, but it's happening all over the country. We have a brother that's frequently intimidated that feeds the homeless downtown that happens to be Muslim and has been told numerous times that this is not what we want you to do. We want people to not be feeding people on the street and specifically target him because he's Muslim. Of course, we see that happen all over the country in issues not necessarily related to homelessness or poverty, but just in general. This kind of criminalization culture that exists and this supposed war on terror, which is really just a war on the poor internally in this country and around the world. Because the nations that are being targeted, and this is where there is a solidarity that exists between those struggling with homelessness and poverty here and those struggling with homelessness and poverty internationally. Who are the countries that are targeted by our country and the powerful nations of the world when it comes to the war on terror? Poor nations. That's why there's a movement that exists called the International Alliance of Inhabitants, of which the Poor People's Campaign is a part of. International Alliance of Inhabitants is this movement to look at housing and land as a human right, regardless of where you live. And it plays a big role in the whole Palestinian question, for instance. So yes, there's some real issues there.
In this area, I've met a lot of people who are homeless for the reasons are so varied. But I did meet several people that were in my same situation, who had lost jobs. And mainly, it seemed to me that the people who'd lost their jobs and stuff were people from the Midwest or from the North, or exactly why they migrated here. I'm not exactly sure why, but most of them have lost their employment elsewhere and came to Florida. I don't know why you come to Florida after losing employment, but I met several other people like myself, and I did a trip to the World Economic Summit in Detroit. That was in July, and on my trip there, I met a lot of homeless people. A lot of people that are, I would consider at a poverty level now, especially after all the auto manufacturers closed, like in Detroit, and I had no idea. I recommend that all Americans should see what's going on. I went to just open my eyes, and there were parts of Detroit and other parts like Flint, Michigan, and places like that, where it was like a war zone. It really looked like the apocalypse. The houses that have been destroyed, huge middle class neighborhoods that every third house is burned. Houses are boarded up everywhere. I'm from the South, and in the South, you've always seen this poor neighborhoods and rich neighborhoods side by side. It's common in the South. It's kind of been built that way. But to go somewhere where you've seen these middle class and upper middle class neighborhoods that are just ravaged by outsourcing, it was a real eye opener. And I think there's a lot of America that has no idea, how hard a lot of places in America have been hit by outsourcing jobs and by closing factories. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we've got to take care of in this country. We're an industrial country. That's what we do. And until we start doing that again, until we start producing and manufacturing things in this country, we're in trouble.
My name is Dina, and I live here in downtown St. Petersburg. And I live about a block from City Hall, and City Hall is pretty infamous for the homeless population that sleeps there on the streets out in front of City Hall every night. And I always think to myself as I'm driving home or as I'm walking by them at night that there's a lot of debate about why people are homeless and about whether or not they should be there. But when it's really cold outside and you drive by, I just think that it doesn't matter which side of the debate that you fall on. you cannot deny what you see, and that's people sleeping on the street, cuddled up either next to their belongings or some were even laying there and their spouses or their significant other are up with a stroller with a child in it, and I think it's you just can't deny that regardless of how you feel about homelessness.
First name's Chris Ernesto, St. Pete for Peace, and it's helping out with the homeless struggle during the tent city situation. And what scared the city is that homeless people could be self-sustaining. And we had a nice piece of property in front of St. Vincent de Paul, and St. Vinny's management decided that it was bad for their image to have homeless people out front. And so they worked a deal with the city to kick the homeless people out. And at the time, there was probably about 75 people who were homeless, who instead of living on the streets, were instead living in tents, managing themselves and progressing with their lives. They had a place to go at the end of the day where they could have a change of clothes, they could get a hot meal, and they could keep their tools so they could go get a job the next day. But that didn't work for the city, so they decided to kick people out. And it created the situation and the condition that led to the tent slashings. It sent a message. It told people who were living on the streets that if you try to fend for yourself, that you're going to be rustled, that not only will you not be allowed to stay in your tent, but you're going to be physically attacked and you're going to have your possessions stolen. And basically it was done to send a message to homeless people that you're not welcome in St. Petersburg. I mean, put yourself in the situation of a homeless person. You're looking for work, you've got a relatively unstable life, and now you have cops chasing you out of your home, and not only telling you you can't stay there, but using box cutters to destroy your personal property and potentially throw you in jail. So of course it scared people. Well, they've escalated. Since Tent City, what happened was the city ordered the tent slashing, and the people who ordered the tent slashing were also put in charge of investigating the tent slashing. And to nobody's surprise, they found themselves that they were not guilty, that they didn't do anything wrong. One untold story about what happened at the tent slashings was that the public outcry was large, and the general population was completely opposed to what happened. And the momentum had shifted in favor of homeless people because of the heinous crimes committed by the St. Pete police. CNN covered it, even Fox News called St. Petersburg possibly the meanest city in the country to homeless.
I think that there's a real dilemma in terms of whose rights do we work to protect? Do we protect the rights of the woman who doesn't want to see homelessness every day because it makes her feel uncomfortable, or do we protect the rights of the homeless man and woman who've worked for a majority of their lives and for some reason aren't working anymore and have paid taxes that built the streets on which they are sleeping? And so I think that those of us who are in a position to understand the two sides of that particular debate, I think we have an obligation to stand up for those individuals who have just sort of maybe fallen on a hard time and really have as much right to be on that sidewalk as I do or as they do. I think that there are homeless individuals that do fall into a specific stereotype, and they do either have a mental illness or they're addicted to some sort of substance, and I think that their perception is going to differ greatly from that of the individual who maybe is sleeping on the street but from 8 to 5 is either in school or is at a job, whether that be a part-time job, a full-time job, day labor, whatever. Their perception of the general working public is that that they are discriminatory against them. I think that there's a perception that the general public views them as lacking in some sort, whether that be lacking of a home or lacking in financial ability or physical ability or cognitive ability. I think they do feel like the general public is discriminatory against them because they lack in some way, and I think that's really sad. Well, as a social worker, we're educated about, they call it deinstitutionalization, and we're educated about that, and we're told that that is a very large component of, or in terms of why individuals are on the street. And to some extent that might be true, and that may have been even more true in my opinion 10 years ago. But I think that we're at a time where there's a new face to homelessness. It's not just the mentally ill. It's families. It's working class individuals who, like you and me in many cases, are one paycheck away from being homeless, and the only difference between us is that I still have that one paycheck and they don't. And so while deinstitutionalization may have been a huge reason for homelessness in a prior time, I think that there's a far greater number of individuals living on the street because of economic discrimination, because of racial discrimination, because of an obvious difference, well, classism, really. Here in St. Pete, a lot of our homeless organizations, or some of our homeless organizations, don't rely on government funding to do the work they do because they're either religious affiliated or run off of money donated from the public. So I think in that respect, it's not a larger financial burden on the government. I think humanity would involve giving every person who needed the service of institution care would then have an opportunity to have that service. And that's obviously not the case. There are a plethora of individuals who I have worked with in the past and work with now that they do have either mental illness, mental disorders, they have some sort of psychological issue, but don't have the resources to get the care that they need. And I think that's where the question of humanity comes in, is that should everyone who needs services be provided them? I think in terms of institutionalization, I think it comes down to rights, because if you're forcing individuals into an institution, are you then depriving them of their rights to live the way they want to live, even if that is in fact on the street?
There was huge momentum to try to overturn what had happened, but at the same time, a cult from Pasco County came down in front of the tent slashings, and they proclaimed to be Christians, and they said that they were going to save homeless people, and basically they brought a few tents with them. And at the time, the city of St. Petersburg, actually Tampa Bay at large, people from all over were coming in and bringing food and water and tents and supplies to the homeless people who had their tents slashed. And at the time, a number of homeless activists were taking those materials, including financial donations, and divvying them up to homeless people who had been affected by the tent slashings. Well, this cult came down, and they're called Common Ground, I believe, and they commandeered all the donations. And within 3 days, they had collected thousands of dollars, all the possessions that people were donating, and they were keeping them for themselves. And what they did is they would go to a homeless person here or there who was a leader within the homeless community, and they would say, if you tell other homeless people to come with us, we'll give you a TV, or we'll give you $100. And what ended up happening was all the money that was donated to homeless people here ended up in the hands of the cults up in Pasco County, and that was being done with the knowledge of the city of St. Petersburg and of St. Vincent de Paul as well. A number of homeless people ended up moving up to Pasco County, and the $500 per month that they were getting basically as the city was trying to buy them off, all that money went to this cult, and no one ever spoke a word about it. Largely it's people who have the respect of other homeless people, and it can be contentious at times. It's not the same hierarchy that we find in like a corporate society, but it managed itself very well. And homeless people were becoming empowered in St. Petersburg, and they realized that they weren't just irrelevant. And when that was happening and leadership was developing and subcommittees were being formed to get day labor corporations to come out and hire people, once that started happening, the city felt very threatened because it could have been a model for other homeless communities throughout the country. And because the city of St. Pete, their main objective is to have no homeless people here in order to try to attract business and tourists, they found that very threatening. And at that point is when they decided to really start repressing the homeless people. They started with the tent slashing. They then moved to ban outdoor sleeping. And now they're talking about putting forth something that would ban feeding of homeless people. It's a common misconception fed by the media that homeless people are lazy, don't want to work, they're just addicted to drugs. And certainly there is a portion of the homeless community that they do cause trouble, and they really don't have a way to help themselves. But the vast majority of homeless people are workers and people who just got a bad break along the way, possibly made a bad decision, and it just snowballed. Almost every homeless person that I know wants to work, tries to work, and like with Tent City, many of the people at Tent City who had their tents slashed were working, but were no longer able to work because their tool belts were stolen or their work boots were confiscated by the police. And so the condition was created for them to fail. And you know, the idea that all of us make mistakes and pay for it, it's a fallacy, because many people in positions of power, police officers, politicians, they make mistakes regularly, but they're not subjected to the same penalties that people on the streets are. When society has spit on you, when you have your local newspaper calling you a nuisance, and you have your politicians and your police and fellow citizens like neighborhood communities saying that you're a threat to their way of life, why would you try to integrate in that? I think a better solution would be for the city of St. Petersburg, who they claim to want to be a major league city. And you know, what comes with the major league city is the attraction of a lot of different types of people. And I hear a lot of people in the city of St. Petersburg wear their Christianity on their sleeve. And it doesn't take much knowledge of the New Testament to understand that Jesus would never treat homeless people the way that these so-called Christian politicians treat homeless people. And I think the truth of the matter is that if St. Pete wants to be a major league city, they have to understand that Florida has some wonderful weather. And if you're going to be a Christian, you have to have a human side to you. And if you're going to have wonderful weather, you have to understand that we may have homeless people. The bigger question is, why do we have homeless people in what is supposedly the biggest economy in the world? Why do we have that many people on the street? And so I think it begs the question of what kind of economic system yields this many people who can't live in a home. As the United States tries to conquer the world via global empire, it's costing us a fortune. And for the $1 trillion that we spend abroad in trying to dictate to others how to live, that money could instead be put to developing industry here, which would produce more jobs and create affordable housing. But that's a much tougher solution if you're a politician and you have a short cycle. You have to try to appeal to corporate interests, and that model is not usually yielding a positive result in the ballots. But our organization has always understood that the struggle between working class and poor people in the United States is directly tied into the United States' desire for a global hegemony. I would never try to appeal to their profitability. I think that's a failed model. I think that as soon as we try to play their game and try to make them turn this into a profitable endeavor for them, we'll never be able to be creative enough to come up with those solutions. What we can appeal to is their sense of humanity. What we appeal to instead is to have some basic sense of humanity, a love of other people, whether they're of the same background as you or not. If we try to play their game, we're not going to fail. The game that they're playing is doomed for failure.
Hello, I am Álvaro Montealegre. I am affiliated somewhat with St. Pete for Peace. I come to all of the events for a few years. I am also part of WMNF Radio out of Tampa. And about the homeless people, what I'd like to say is first, I see it as a violation of human rights by the government on the people. I think it's especially a problem, an attack of capitalists and of capitalism on the people. I believe that we also as human beings are all responsible. We cannot say that we have nothing to do with it. No doubt there are some people who want to live on their own in whatever ways they want to live, and many people choose different ways. But the great majority of people, I think, want a home, want a warm home, a place to be, a place to rear their children. And I think that as that is not happening, and as we all are watching this happening, as we see it happening, as we see homeless people without homes, and there used to be a better term in the United States. They used to be called dispossessed. From some time this way, they've been called homeless. Well, homeless is not definitive or doesn't describe the situation clearly. Dispossessed means they have been taken of all of their possessions, and I think that's clearly more what is happening. And I think that as we see that happening, we as human beings are all responsible. If there is wrong happening in our eyes, and we're not doing anything about it, we're not moving on it. We're not organizing to stop it. And those of us who understand that it is government provoked and it is carried on because of the system, of corporations having power, absolute and continuous power all the time, their need to make profits, continuously make profits over the rights of people, over the needs of people, is causing the problem. It causes the problem of homelessness. If we're not doing anything about it, if we're not involved in the solution, we are part of the problem. So it is my belief that we all must take a stand. We all must take action in relationship to it.